As we all know, the enemy and his secret occult societies utilize superficial forms of magic in order to control and mentally subjugate society. Witchcraft, at its core, is the practice of using hidden knowledge, unseen forces, symbols, words, and ritual to influence the mind, body, and will of a target without their conscious awareness or consent. And when you strip away the theatrical imagery that this word conjures, you realize that this definition maps perfectly onto modern systems of psychological control. The word itself has been deliberately loaded with images of cauldrons and costumes to make people dismiss the concept entirely, which is itself a trick, because the moment you laugh at the word witchcraft, you stop looking for the practice. At its functional level, witchcraft operates through three primary mechanisms: the manipulation of the target's environment, the manipulation of the target's perception, and the manipulation of the target's internal chemistry, and every form of mind control, hard or soft, operates through those exact same three channels. MK represents hard witchcraft, the direct and forced alteration of a person's consciousness through chemical agents. Electroshock, sleep deprivation, trauma, and hypnotic suggestion, essentially destroying the natural architecture of the mind and rebuilding it according to the programmer's design, which is indistinguishable from what ancient texts describe as demonic possession or spiritual hijacking of the will. Soft mind control is slow witchcraft. It operates through media, education, religion, language, music, advertising, and culture, casting its spells gradually over years and generations so that the target never feels the moment their thinking was shaped for them, and by the time the programming is complete, they will defend it as their own free thought. Ritual in witchcraft serves the same function as repetition in propaganda. Both work by creating a patterned, predictable sequence that lowers the critical mind's resistance and allows a command or belief to be installed below the threshold of conscious awareness. Symbols in witchcraft carry embedded energetic and psychological charge, and placing those symbols in the environment of a target, in their media, their currency, their architecture, their fashion, is a form of continuous low-level casting, constantly reinforcing the programmer's intended reality in the subconscious of anyone exposed to them. The use of fear, trauma, and terror as tools of control is one of the oldest forms of witchcraft, because a mind in a state of fear has its rational discerning function suppressed and becomes highly suggestible, which is why both ancient curses and modern psychological warfare begin by inducing a state of dread in the target before delivering the intended programming. The practitioners of these systems understood, as all serious students of occult science have understood, that the human mind has layers, a conscious layer that reasons and analyzes, and a deeper unconscious layer that runs on symbol, emotion, frequency, and repetition. Thus, witchcraft in all its forms, from MK to Hollywood to the evening news, is simply the art of bypassing the conscious layer and writing directly onto the deeper one. The protection against witchcraft in all its forms has always been the same: knowledge of the mechanism, because a spell only works on a mind that does not see it coming, and the moment a person understands the technique being used against them, the symbols, the frequencies, the false causes, the loaded language, the ritual repetition, then the working loses its grip, which is precisely why the most important thing any system of control will do is make sure the people it targets never study how. The trick is done. Understanding Tricknology is essential because you cannot defend yourself against a warfare you cannot see, and once you learn to recognize the misdirection, the false causes, and the imitative patterns being used against you, the entire illusion loses its power over your mind. By flooding the environment with noise, such as endless debates about surface-level issues, celebrity drama, political theater, and manufactured social conflicts, the target population of oppression and offensive warfare is always reacting to something irrelevant, while the actual mechanisms of control operate quietly in the background. The enemy will point to poverty, crime, and dysfunction within the Black community as the cause of their condition, when those things are actually the symptoms of a warfare that has been deliberately waged against them, making the victim appear to be the author of their own destruction. When people begin to get close to identifying the real source of their suffering, a new distraction is introduced, a new scandal, a new enemy, a new crisis, keeping the mind perpetually chasing explanations that were planted rather than discovered. They fund and amplify internal division within targeted groups, so that the community's energy is spent fighting itself rather than identifying the external force responsible for the conditions they're fighting about. The educational system functions as a long-term red herring, training generations to study approved explanations for historical and social conditions that carefully omit the deliberate warfare behind those conditions. Religion, when weaponized, serves the same function, redirecting the target's anger towards spiritual resignation, or an invisible enemy rather than the visible, tangible one. The genius of the trick is that it is self-sustaining. Once you've convinced someone that the red herring is the real cause, they will defend that false explanation themselves and attack anyone who tries to point at the real one. The result is a population that is surrounded by the evidence of warfare, but has been so thoroughly misdirected that they cannot name what is happening to them. When it comes to the facade of superiority that is feigned by the enemy, Tricknology and superficial magic is his main apparatus of illusion. In combat, the fighter who cannot match your natural speed, power, or instinct will study your movements and imitate your style, then present that style as his own invention, so you don't recognize it when it's used against you. He will use weapons, gear, and external tools to artificially close the gap between his natural ability and yours, because without those tools the gap is too wide to overcome. He will control the narrative around the fight, the rules, the referee, the crowd, the scoring, so that even when you're winning by any honest measure, the decision goes against you. He will condition you psychologically before the fight even starts, through doubt, distraction, and miseducation, so that you enter the ring already undermining yourself. And the moment you see through all of that, the moment you recognize the imitation, strip away the tools, ignore the narrative, and trust your own natural capability, his entire advantage disappears, because it was never rooted in genuine power to begin with. With the absence of Melanin, it is impossible for Caucasians to possess supernatural abilities or supersense perceptions. This is why the system of white supremacy can only utilize trick magic instead of veridic supernatural magic. A trick is defined as an act or procedure intended to achieve an end by deceptive or fraudulent means. It is a mischievous action, a prank. Veridic means truthful or veracious, indicating something that is genuine and not illusory. Veridic magic pertains to authentic and genuine feats that cannot be easily explained or replicated, and is often rooted in mystical practices and spiritual traditions. In contrast, trick magic is based on illusion and sleight of hand, where a magician employs skillful techniques to misdirect the subject's attention away from their physical mechanisms as opposed to spiritual mechanisms, and create the appearance of supernatural phenomena. Melanin is supernatural, while trickery is superficial. Trickery utilizes camouflaged external apparatus such as chemical powders, electric frequency, etc., while melanin is the human's internal apparatus. Therefore, the enemy must pattern himself after the melanin god, melanated nature, and the melanated universe. The principle of melanin imitation in magic is even admitted, though indirectly, out of the mouths of white occultists themselves. In the 1922 book called The History of Magic, by Eliphas Levi, it states, quote, "There is no question that for Eliphas Levi, his secret doctrine of occult science is contained in a hypothesis concerning a universal medium denominated the astral light, which is neither more or less than the odyllic force of Baron Reichenbach, as the French writer himself admits substantially. 1. It is a universal plastic mediator, a common receptacle for vibrations of movement and images of form. It may be called the imagination of nature. 2. It is that which God created when he uttered the fiat lux. 3. It is the great medium of occult force, but as such it is a blind force, which can be used for good or evil, being especially obedient to the light of grace. 4. It is the element of electricity and lightning. 5. The four imponderable fluids are diversive manifestations of this one force, which is inseparable from the first matter, and sets the latter in motion. 6. It is now resplendent, now igneous, now electric, now magnetic. 7. It has apparently two modes, which tend to equilibrium, and to know the middle point of this equilibrium seems to be the attainment of the great work. 8. It is ethereal in the infinite, astral in stars and planets, metallic, specific, or mercurial in metals, vegetable in plants, vital in animals, magnetic or personal in men. 9. It is extracted from animals by absorption, and from men by generation. 10. In magic it is the glass of visions, the receptacle of all reflections. The seer has his visions therein, the diviner divines by its means, and the magus evokes spirits. 11. When the astral light is fixed about the center by condensation, it becomes the philosophical stone of alchemy, in which form it is an artificial phosphorus, containing the concentrated virtues of all generative heat. 12. When condensed by a triple fire it resolves into oil, and this oil is the universal medicine. It can then only be contained in glass, this being the non-conductor. End quote. All of these speculations, as we have illustrated, are the supernatural characteristics of the universal, multifaceted, transfigurative biochemical plastic called melanin, which permeates through all earthly, celestial, and metaphysical life forms and cloaks all forms of light within its darkness. This so-called astral light is what Levi suggested as the secret to all magic, which was meticulously illustrated in the 12 speculations of his hypothesis for the secret doctrine of occult science. The term melanin, of course, is never mentioned in his own words. It seems as though the secret code of the white occultists is to never publicly mention the black atom of their wisdom and to even shun it altogether. As translator Arthur Edward Waite states, quote, "Again, here is a clear issue at its value, and I make this qualification because the astral light is, as I have said, a speculation, and personally I neither know nor care whether such a fluid exists or, in such case, whether it is applicable to the uses indicated." End quote. All pseudo-magic of white supremacy, such as hypnotism, frequency warfare, biochemical warfare, etc., is only effectuated through curated illusions which are not rooted in actuality. The tactic of pseudo-trick magic is explicitly illustrated in page 13 of the MK Ultra Briefing document itself, in the section labeled Objective and Details of Work. It states, quote, "All three of these projects are to find the contractor a magician, to write a manual on the various aspects of the magician's art which could be useful in covert operations. One aspect of this project was to develop skills which could be used by the working field case officer to surreptitiously place a pill or other item in an item to be consumed by a target personality, for example, a drinker. A contractor was employed under subproject number 34 to prepare a paper on magician's techniques for the covert communication of information." End quote. The 1932 book called Quicker Than the Eye by CIA magician John Mulholland is a detailed exploration of magic, illusion, and the psychology behind tricks. The book serves as a guide for aspiring magicians, offering insights into the techniques and methods that create the illusion of magic. Mulholland emphasizes the importance of misdirection, suggesting that audience perception is often manipulated to enhance the effect of a trick. Through anecdotes and practical advice, he illustrates how the interplay of imagination and sensory experience can make elusive performances captivating. In the chapter titled The Way You're Fooled, it states, quote, "As it is impossible to recall a series of unconnected perceptions experienced but once, and as the details of a trick will not be recalled in a connected series, few of them will be remembered at all. Since one cannot remember what one saw, any story which one tells about a trick is bound to be inaccurate." Alfred Binet has said, "The illusion of each trick is not merely the result of one single cause, but of many so insignificant that to perceive them would be quite as difficult as to count, with the naked eye, the grains of sand on the seashore." End quote. In the context of MK Ultra techniques and the art of illusion, the power of imagination is deeply intertwined with our senses, creating a complex web of perception and experience. Each illusion is not solely the product of one factor. Rather, it emerges from an intricate interplay of multiple subtleties that escape our immediate awareness. Just as counting grains of sand on a shore is nearly impossible without focused attention, discerning the many layers behind an illusion requires keen insight and experience. The human mind, steeped in imagination, often fills in gaps, shaping realities based on suggestion and sensory cues. Sensory inputs, sounds, sights, and even smells can be finely tuned to evoke specific emotions or responses, creating a powerful backdrop for illusions. These orchestrated elements work together seamlessly, crafting experiences that can feel profoundly real, even when they are not. In this sense, the manipulation of imagination and the senses transforms ordinary moments into extraordinary experiences, making individuals vulnerable to external influence. The art of illusion, therefore, does not rely on a singular trick, but on a multitude of undetectable nuances, illustrating the fragile relationship between what we perceive and what we believe. Think about what he's saying. An illusion works not because of one dramatic mechanism, but because of a web of tiny, barely perceptible manipulations of attention, of expectation, of sensory experience. Layer enough small manipulations on top of each other, and the human mind fills in the gaps. It tells itself a story, and it believes that story. In the chapter titled The Way You're Fooled, he delves into the intricate techniques that magicians use to deceive their audiences. He outlines several key principles of misdirection by emphasizing how a magician can divert attention away from the method behind a trick. Mulholland discusses the concept of what is called the magician's moment, where the audience's focus is directed at a particular point in order to make them oblivious to other crucial actions occurring elsewhere. He also highlights the psychological aspects of perception, including how people's expectations and beliefs can distort their understanding of what they see. The chapter includes specific examples of tricks and elaborates on how simple gestures or playful language can alter viewers' interpretations. Mulholland illustrates that the art of being fooled relies not just on the mechanics of a trick, but also on the audience's willingness to accept and engage with the illusion. By dissecting these elements, he reveals how deeply rooted the interplay of suggestion and belief is in the realm of magic. There is always a logical explanation behind trick magic, emphasizing that every illusion can be understood through a combination of methods, psychology, and techniques. No matter how astonishing a trick may seem, there is a rational basis for how it is achieved, often rooted in principles such as misdirection, sleight of hand, or clever use of props. The wise man should seek these explanations instead of succumbing to the allure of mystery. The true essence of trick magic lies in understanding the mechanics behind the illusions. By revealing that logical explanations underlie tricks, he underscores the importance of intelligence and skill in creating effective magic performances. In the declassified work called The Official CIA Manual of Trickery and Deception, it illustrated this concept of magic tricks having a rational explanation. In the introduction of the work it states, quote, TSS supported other activities of the agency as well, forging travel and identity documents for agents who worked under alias names, printing propaganda leaflets, installing clandestine microphones and cameras, and building concealments for spy equipment in furniture, briefcases, and clothing. To those uninitiated in the craft of espionage, the secretive work of the TSS scientists and engineers at times appeared to accomplish the impossible. In reality, this handful of CIA scientists was demonstrating the third law of prediction advanced by science fiction author Arthur C. Clarke. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. End quote. As stated in Episode 6, the melanin-deficient enemy utilizes technology, which is pseudo-melanin, in order to artificially access the bioelectrical capabilities of melanin. Melanin is not only capable of doing exactly what technology does, but it has infinite more potential. A primary example of the rational explanations of elusive magic is in the movie, The Wizard of Oz. Dorothy is swept away from her home in Kansas to the fantastical land of Oz, where she seeks the help of the wizard to return home. Throughout her journey, she encounters various characters, each seeking something they believe the wizard can provide. The Scarecrow wants a brain, the Tin Man desires a heart, and the Cowardly Lion seeks courage. When they finally meet the wizard, they discover that he is not a powerful figure, but rather a man using tricks and illusions to project authority. This revelation aligns with the idea that there is always a logical explanation behind magic. The wizard's power is rooted in deception and misdirection. Ultimately, the characters learn that their desired qualities already exist within them, highlighting the deeper truth behind appearances and the importance of self-discovery beyond superficial illusions. There are many principles to the art of illusion and trickery. Pantomime, for example, involves using body language and facial expressions to insinuate a story or narrative that audiences are encouraged to believe. By conveying emotions and actions without words, it suggests scenarios that guide viewers' perceptions, effectively planting seeds of belief through suggestion. Sleight of hand refers to the artful manipulation of objects, often involving hidden motions and camouflaged apparatus that allow magicians to perform tricks without the audience noticing. This technique distracts attention while facilitating deceptive actions, making what is unseen more powerful than what is visible. Contortion involves twisting and deforming objects or actions to create an unexpected outcome. In magic and deception, it can refer to the physical manipulation of props or even the shaping of narratives, leading viewers to perceive events in a way that defies normal expectations. Press agent refers to the use of false propaganda to create an exaggerated or misleading image. In deception, it serves as a tool to craft a narrative that enhances public perception, shaping beliefs through controlled information and misrepresentation to maintain an aura of influence or authority. A primary trick of the enemy is what I refer to as imitative patterning. Imitation by the enemy means the practice of modeling his thoughts, behaviors, and/or designs after elements that are found in humans, nature, the universe, scripture, and attributes of God and ancient human civilizations. It is the drawing of inspiration from the inherent patterns and structures of the melanin natural world. It is the wisdom derived from how the black aboriginals of ancient civilizations knew to pattern their civilizations, systems, and structures after melanin bodies and systems as well. By imitating blackness, the enemy often postures himself as more intelligent than those who do not understand the power of imitating melanin. Think about the architecture of ancient Egypt, imitated in government buildings across Washington, D.C. Think about spiritual practices rooted in African and indigenous traditions, repackaged and sold back. Think about the scientific properties of melanin, studied and appropriated through biotech. The imitation is always downstream from the original. But the trick is getting you to forget which came first. By imitating what melanated civilizations built and understood, the imitator positions himself as the originator. In the context of MK Ultra, the use of chemicals to magically create new personalities in the mind involved the primary use of chemicals and drugs. In the context of trick magic in general, the use of chemicals, potions, and substances plays a significant role in magic and deception, acting as tools that enhance the illusionary experience. These elements can create dramatic visual effects, such as color changes, smoke, or lighting alterations, which captivate the audience's attention and often evoke awe. In many performances, substances are used to manipulate the senses through scents, tastes, or visual stimuli to create a more immersive environment that reinforces the illusion of magic. For instance, potions may be utilized to give the appearance of transformation or healing, tapping into psychological expectations about what these experiences should feel like. The strategic use of chemicals can serve to obscure the mechanics behind tricks. By altering perceptions chemically, magicians can engage the audience's imagination, making them more susceptible to believing in the impossible. Ultimately, these elements extend the boundaries of what is achievable in performance, blending artistry with science to create compelling deceptions that challenge reality. As far as the imitation of melanin, the enemy has always sought to gain the power of this supernatural biochemical, not only through technology, but through surgical replacement with black organs and body parts, direct consumption through the cannibalism of black bodies and blood, as well as MK Ultra-style techniques that access supernatural parts of the mind, that he may find methods of accessing it himself. In the book titled The Kundalini Experience, Psychosis or Transcendence by Dr. Lee Sanella, which details the comparison between psychosis and the supernatural Kundalini process, it states, quote, "Tissue is torn, blood vessels are severed, blood is spilled, and much fluid is lost. The heart races and the blood pressure soars. There is moaning, crying, and screaming. A severe injury? No, only a relatively normal human birth." The description sounds pathological because the symptoms were not discussed in relation to the outcome, a new human being. In a darkened room, a man sits alone. His body is swept by muscle spasms. Indescribable sensations and sharp pains run from his feet up his legs and over his back and neck. His skull feels as if it is about to burst. Inside his head, he hears roaring sounds and high-pitched whistling. His hands burn. He feels his body tearing within. Then suddenly he laughs and is overcome with bliss. A psychotic episode? No, this is a psychophysiological transformation, a rebirth process as natural as physical birth. It seems pathological only because the symptoms are not understood in relation to the outcome, a psychically transformed human being. When allowed to progress to completion, this process may culminate in deep psychological balance, inner strength, and emotional maturity. Its initial stages, however, often share the violence, helplessness, and imbalance that attend the start of extrauterine human life. The Kundalini process is clearly not just an altered state of consciousness, since it can last from several months to many years. For its duration, the individual passes in and out of different states of consciousness, from wakefulness to sleeping and dreaming, and also to superlucidity in any of these states. The entire process falls, in fact, outside the categories of normal and psychotic. A person undergoing this striking psychophysiological transformation has experiences that are far from normal, though usually without becoming so disorganized as to be considered psychotic. End quote. The enemy has taken the aspects of this spiritual process of Kundalini and distorted it from a natural process of making a spiritually transcended mind into a process of making a hypnotic slave mind through extreme trauma. The enemy recognized the dual aspect of the mind, and more specifically the neuromelanated mind, and switched the constructive ascension process into a destructive, dissociating process. Instead of using natural herbs to access altered states, he utilizes his denatured technology called drugs. He utilizes electric shocks to artificially induce the heated Kundalini sensations when it encounters a part of the psychophysiological system that offers particular resistance. But the heat generated by the friction of the Kundalini against this resistance soon burns out the blockage, and then the sensations cease. So, let's take another look at the hypnotic induction process and symptoms of culture trauma-based mind control. The induction process includes drugs, electroshock to the brain and body, suggestive sounds and commands to the subconscious, Prolonged sleep. This produces dissociation, indefinite teetering states of unconscious trance, hallucinatory sounds and voices, fluctuating blood pressure, weakness, uncontrollable muscle spasms and bodily functions, sharp pains, deep psychological imbalance and mind splitting, regressive childlike state, losing the will, helpless confusion, depression, deliriousness, terror, indifference to people, etc. The CIA has admitted to conducting many experiments to confirm the reality of psychic abilities such as telepathy, remote viewing, telekinesis, etc. They have even admitted that they have found remote viewing to be absolutely real. The enemy utilized the unnatural apparatus of traumatization in order to achieve this breakthrough. In Chapter 8, which lists a summary of Kundalini signs and symptoms, there are the motor symptoms, which include automatic body movements and postures, unusual breathing patterns, paralysis. Then there are the sensory symptoms, tickling sensations, heat and cold sensations, inner lights and visions, inner sounds, pains. Then there are the interpretive symptoms, unusual or extreme emotion, distortions of thought processes, detachment, dissociation, single seeing or seeing both inner and outer landscapes, great body, which means to feel larger than your body. Finally, there are the non-physiological symptoms, which include out-of-body experiences and psychic perceptions. To notate the difference between artificial Kundalini and natural Kundalini, we can remember that serpent power equals energy of consciousness, while satanic serpent power equals the energy of unconsciousness. When it comes to the mechanisms of trick magic, symbols also play a crucial role in magic and perception. They effectively communicate complex ideas and emotions in a condensed form, which allows audiences to quickly grasp the essence of the performance. By directing attention to specific elements, symbols enhance the audience's focus and aid in the magician's use of misdirection. Symbols carry layered meanings that resonate on multiple levels by tapping into cultural or historical references that engage collective consciousness. This deepens the connection between the magician and the audience, creating a sense of shared experience. Furthermore, symbols can evoke emotional responses, amplifying the overall impact of a magic performance. In this way, they contribute to the illusion of magic, transforming ordinary acts into extraordinary experiences. Ultimately, the significance of symbols lies in their ability to enhance belief, perception, and emotional engagement in the art of magic. As Dr. Richard King states in The African Origin of Biological Psychiatry, quote, Ernest Jones defined the quality of symbols as those which represent some other idea, represent the primary element or object through some basic similarity, have sensory qualities similar pertinent to a primary element which is abstract and or complex, make use of thought forms which are ancient, both ontogenetically and phylogenetically, are a manifest expression of a hidden idea, and are chosen spontaneously and unconsciously because they feel right. Symbols have also been defined as conscious perception of sensory experiences, which is substituted for unconscious mental content. They are also seen as the basic element where indirect representations of unconscious material are built dreams, fantasies, hallucinations, and language. Implicit in the foregoing is the idea that one root idea may be expressed as many symbols. That is, many diversified symbols can be used to represent the same thing. This fact is due to the inherited manner in which the mind perceives or attaches meaning to experience. End quote. That last part is important. You don't consciously decide that a symbol resonates with you. It works on you below the level of rational thought. Symbols communicate directly to the unconscious mind. We're talking about symbols found across art, architecture, fashion, music, advertising, ritual, and popular culture, functions as a hidden language. Geometric shapes, astrological signs, eye motifs, sacred geometry embedded in the design of buildings. These symbols carry layered meanings that resonate on multiple levels simultaneously: cultural, historical, emotional, spiritual. Occult symbolism refers to the use of symbols, images, and artifacts that convey hidden or esoteric meanings, often associated with spiritual or mystical practices. These symbols are found across various cultures and belief systems, which frequently embody concepts related to power, transformation, and the unseen forces of nature and the universe. Occult symbols can include geometric shapes, astrological signs, religious icons, etc. As such, occult symbolism often represents a blending of mysticism, philosophy, and ritual. This type of symbolism is intricately woven into various aspects of society to serve as a means of communicating hidden truths or esoteric knowledge. This includes art and literature, where many artists and writers incorporate occult symbols into their work, embedding layers of meaning that invite deeper analysis and interpretation, often signaling alignment with specific philosophical or spiritual beliefs. It also includes architecture such as buildings, especially in religious or governmental contexts, which often feature symbolic designs, such as pentagrams, eye motifs, or sacred geometry, intended to convey spiritual significance or power. Then there is fashion and branding, in which certain fashion styles and brands utilize occult symbols to project mystery or allure, subtly communicating deeper meanings to those in the know. As far as music and performance, musicians and performers frequently employ occult imagery in their videos and live shows, creating a visual language that resonates with themes of rebellion, enlightenment, or transformation. There is also the rituals and ceremonies, in which various groups and organizations integrate occult symbolism into their rituals, using specific signs or gestures to invoke spiritual energies or establish a connection to ancient wisdom. In culture, movies, television shows, and video games often feature occult symbols as plot devices or visual motifs, which introduce audiences to the concept of hidden knowledge or alternate realities. Marketing campaigns may subtly use occult symbolism to evoke emotions or connect with consumer desires on a subconscious level, leveraging deeper cultural references to enhance the message. As far as social movements, some social and political movements adopt occult symbolism as a means of identity, solidarity, or communication, catalyzing group cohesion and shared purpose. As far as the use of trick language, which we detailed in episode 4, symbolism and language are inseparable because every word is itself a symbol, a sound or shape that has been agreed upon to represent a concept, and whoever controls the definition of the symbol controls how the listener perceives the reality it points to. When oppressors rename, redefine, or invert the meaning of words, they are performing an act of conquest on the mind, because the target begins thinking in a language that was engineered to limit or misdirect their understanding of themselves and the world. Frequency is the physical dimension of language. Every word spoken is a sound wave, a vibration that enters the body through the ear and registers not just intellectually but physiologically, which is why certain tones, rhythms, and cadences produce measurable changes in heart rate, brainwave activity, and emotional state. Hypnotism works primarily through the deliberate manipulation of vocal frequency and rhythm. The hypnotist uses a slow, repetitive, monotone cadence to lower the subject's brainwave state from alert beta down into the suggestible alpha and theta states, at which point the subconscious mind accepts commands it would normally filter out. MK Ultra built on this understanding by combining chemical agents with suggestive sound and spoken commands, recognizing that a mind already destabilized by drugs or trauma is far more vulnerable to linguistic programming because its critical filter has been dismantled. Trick language operates by embedding the desired conclusion inside the framing of a question or statement, so the listener never realizes they are being guided, the classic example being a question that presupposes guilt, forcing the target to argue from a position of defense rather than neutrality. Media and advertising use this constantly through what is called loaded language, words and phrases that carry pre-attached emotional charge, so that the audience feels a particular way about a subject before they have had a chance to think about it independently. Repetition is itself a form of hypnotic programming. A phrase repeated enough times bypasses critical analysis entirely and becomes accepted as self-evident truth, which is why propaganda relies on slogans rather than arguments. Ancient civilizations understood the power of sound and word as a sacred technology. The concept of the spoken word as a creative force appears across African, Egyptian, Hebrew, and Vedic traditions, and the suppression of this knowledge is itself part of the warfare. Because a people who understand that language is frequency and frequency shapes reality will be far more careful about what they speak, what they listen to, and what they allow to be spoken over them. Ultimately, controlling language means controlling the architecture of thought itself, and a population that thinks in the oppressor's language, accepts the oppressor's definitions, and bathes daily in the oppressor's frequencies is a population that has been conquered not by force but by sound, symbol, and suggestion. Horror and thriller cinema has always depicted, in plain sight, the exact techniques of MK Ultra and mind control, simply wrapped in supernatural framing, so the audience processes it as fantasy rather than documentation. The classic possession film follows a precise pattern. A target is isolated from their support system, subjected to an overwhelming external force that invades their mind, loses control of their own body and voice, speaks in a personality that is not their own, and must be restrained. And this is not a metaphor for demonic activity. It is a literal visual description of trauma-based mind control, dissociation, and the creation of an alter personality, which are the documented outcomes of MK Ultra programming. The exorcism ritual itself mirrors the deprogramming process. A handler figure uses repetitive commands, religious symbols, and psychological pressure to either reinforce or break a programmed state, depending on which side of the equation you are looking at. And the subject strapped to the bed convulsing is simply a person whose nervous system has been shattered by trauma and is cycling through the symptoms that Sinella documented in his clinical study of forced Kundalini activation. The image of someone strapped to a chair being electroshocked, which appears in countless films framed as either horror or punishment, is not fiction. It is the literal central technique of MK Ultra, used to induce amnesia between programming sessions, to shatter the baseline personality, and to make the mind blank and receptive to new installed instructions. The split personality thriller, where a character discovers they have an alternate identity that does other things without their knowledge or memory, is Hollywood's most direct depiction of the multiple personality disorder that MK Ultra deliberately engineered in its subjects through repeated trauma, because the fractured mind naturally creates dissociated compartments. And programmers learn to install specific personalities into specific compartments that could be triggered on command. The demonic voice that speaks through a possessed person, giving commands and information the host body would not normally have access to, mirrors the phenomenon of a programmed alter being triggered, a different personality, installed through trauma and hypnosis, emerging and operating while the primary personality is suppressed and unaware. The horror trope of the puppet or the doll that moves on its own, or the person who acts against their own will, is the cinematic representation of a handler controlling a programmed subject. The puppet has no agency. It moves entirely at the direction of an external operator, and the horror that audiences feel while watching it is a deeply instinctual recognition of what it looks like to have your will removed from you. The haunted house, where an invisible force in the environment causes the inhabitant to slowly lose their grip on reality, behave erratically, and turn against the people closest to them, is a perfect metaphor for soft mind control. The target is not physically restrained, but the environment itself has been saturated with a force that gradually dismantles their perception, their relationships, and their sense of self. Hollywood understood that showing these techniques literally would be dangerous, but wrapping them in supernatural dressing and releasing them as entertainment served a dual purpose. It desensitized the public to the imagery of mind control, so it no longer registered as alarming, while simultaneously hiding the instruction manual in plain sight for those with the knowledge to read it. The most important thing to understand is that the framing of demons and monsters was chosen deliberately to ensure that anyone who pointed at the real-world parallel would sound crazy. Because if you say someone is possessed by a demon, people take you seriously in a religious context. But if you say that same visual depicts a government mind control victim, you are labeled a conspiracy theorist, which is itself the red herring working exactly as designed. In conclusion of this episode, and to summarize, the enemy studies and imitates the natural patterns, structures, and capabilities of melanin, nature, and ancient civilizations, then presents those imitations as original innovations, positioning himself as the source of what he actually borrowed. By controlling the historical narrative through media, education, and propaganda, he erases the original from memory, so that the imitation appears to have no predecessor. He deploys technology as a substitute for biological capability, using chemicals, frequencies, and electronic apparatus to artificially replicate what melanin does internally, and because most people don't understand the original, they mistake the manufactured copy for the real thing. Through symbols, ritual, and psychological conditioning embedded in culture, he operates on the unconscious mind of the population, shaping belief and perception without the target ever realizing they are being managed. Ultimately, the posture of superiority is maintained not through genuine power, but through sustained misdirection, keeping attention on the performance while concealing the mechanism, just as a magician's authority collapses the moment the audience sees behind the curtain. The use of powerful symbols to shape perception without the audience's awareness is itself a form of trick magic. It's the press agent at a cultural scale. It's sleight of hand with meaning. When you learn to read the symbols, the trick stops working. The moment you understand the mechanism, the illusion collapses. It is about seeing the difference between what is real and what is performed, between the internal and the external, between veridic and trick. Melanin is the internal apparatus, a biological, biochemical reality with documented electrical and photonic properties, present throughout nature and the universe. The occultists built entire secret doctrines around its properties without naming it. The government reverse-engineered its spiritual processes through trauma and technology. The entertainment industry uses its symbolic language to shape perception. And the whole apparatus of trick magic, the sleight of hand, the pantomime, the press agent, the chemicals, the imitative patterning, exists because the internal thing cannot be manufactured. It can only be imitated. Understanding this is not just intellectual. It's practical. When you understand that every illusion has a rational explanation, when you train yourself to look for the mechanism behind the trick, you become significantly harder to deceive. You stop looking for the wizard. You stop waiting for an external power to grant you what you already carry. We must know the difference between trick and veridic. Know the mechanism. Pull back the curtain. See the mechanics behind what you've been told is mysterious, powerful, or supernatural, and understand the difference between what is real and what is performed.